The Trump administration is pushing back on reports that the president was aware of allegations that Russia was using the Taliban to target American soldiers. Natalie Brandt has the latest from the White House.
President Trump is questioning a report that Russia offered bounties to the Taliban to kill American soldiers.
The intelligence people many of them didn't believe it happened at all. I think it's a hoax. I think it's a hoax by the newspapers and the Democrats.
Sources confirmed to CBS News the information was in the president's written classified daily brief, but the president was not verbally briefed.
The person who decided early on whether the president should be briefed on this in the Oval intelligence briefing was his senior career civil servant, a CIA officer. And she made that decision because she didn't have confidence in the intelligence that came up.
Intelligence agencies looking into the report disagreed over the validity of the claims, but the Trump administration took it seriously enough to relay the information to U.S. and coalition forces.
We responded in precisely the correct way with respect to making sure that our forces were postured appropriately, that they were aware of the level of the threat, the credibility of the threat, and that we were there.
Secretary of Defense Mark Esper tweeted, "I want to assure all of our service members that we take seriously any and all potential threats against U.S. military personnel."
I think the president has a lot to answer for.
Joe Biden, the president's Democratic challenger, was asked about the report at a campaign event Tuesday.
It's an absolute dereliction of duty, if any of this is even remotely true.
And a group of anti-Trump Republicans is out with a new ad showing a former Navy SEAL accusing the president of being a coward who isn't able to stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, the White House.
So for more on all of this, I want to bring in former Department of Homeland Security advisor Charles Marino. He's also a national and Homeland Security advisor for the security company X Labs. Charles, as we just saw, sources tell CBS News that information on Russia allegedly targeting American soldiers was in the president's daily written brief, but that he was not told verbally. Help us understand, why would intelligence officials make that decision?
Yeah, thanks, Lara. You know, it's all about credibility of a threat. And so for something not to make it into what we're talking about here, the presidential daily briefing or the PDB on a daily basis, means that something would not be deemed credible and therefore it wouldn't make it in. But there's got to be consistency here. If something is put in writing in that report, you would expect it to also be verbally briefed to the president. So what we have here is the PDB is very specialized in the way that it's briefed to the consumer of the information, which is here the president. Some presidents like to read it, and some presidents like to have it both verbally recited and then also go back and read it and describe it. So here you want to make sure there's redundancy in how the president's being briefed. If he just wants to be briefed verbally, then we've got to make sure that those that are deemed to be threats against American interests across the globe make it to the president in his verbal briefing.
I'm wondering if you think that this raises any concerns when it comes to national security.
Well, it does, because, you know, as citizens, we always want to know that the president is getting any information regarding developing or imminent threats against this country or against its citizens. So you want to make sure that, you know, it's in accordance with the 2004 Intelligence Reform Act, which followed after the intelligence failings of September 11th, where the Director of National Intelligence, his cabinet position, is quarterbacking all of this information that's coming in from the 17 intelligence agencies across the government. We want to make sure that the president has the information that he needs. And by the way, if the information is important enough to share with allies, I would imagine that it's also important enough to make sure that it comes to the president's attention.
Well, and on that quarterbacking idea, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that he often receives information that doesn't rise to the level of a presidential briefing. That, of course, makes sense. But I'm wondering if you can talk about how serious a matter has to be for the president to be verbally briefed. And in this case, our sources say that, in fact, the president was briefed on the matter. It was just in the written briefing as opposed to a verbal briefing.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, anything, just to reiterate, anything involving the life or safety of Americans and American interests around the globe certainly rise to the level of importance. But again, back to the key word here, there's got to be some consistency and there's got to be some leadership in making sure that the President of the United States is getting the intelligence that he needs to make decisive action or to send the intelligence agencies back out to further develop levels of intelligence if it's not exactly to where he thinks it needs to be to make a good decision. So there's lots that go in here, but there needs to be this overarching structure to make sure. And if we're going through the trouble of putting this in the president's daily briefing in writing, we also have to make sure that they're getting it verbally.
Yeah, especially since the president has indicated, this president at least, that is how he likes to receive his information. We've heard from the White House so often. The president's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, said that this intelligence wasn't initially brought to the president's attention because it was unverified and that there was no consensus among the intelligence community. I'm wondering what your take is on officials disagreeing on how to move forward with this information. What's happening behind the scenes there?
Yeah. Well, nothing in life is 100%, and that's certainly true with intelligence, right? Intelligence comes with probabilities, it comes with risk, and you have to weigh all the risk and reward, the pros, the cons. And what you want to make sure is that that in the intelligence process, you're not incorporating too much of the political perspective. So somebody's got to make a decision here regarding the intelligence. We know who it is in the cabinet, the Director of National Intelligence, and he's got to make sure he's kind of that filter to the president to make sure that what needs to be briefed gets briefed. It's great that the president has a national security advisor, all the other cabinet officials that are eligible to get the presidential daily briefing each and every morning. But at the end of the day, the mandate falls to the Director of National Intelligence to make sure that this information is getting to where it needs to be. But as far as the certainty regarding intelligence, yes, there's varying levels of percentages in terms of confidence about intelligence. But at the end of the day, again, if it comes to the threats against American citizens and interests around the globe, I think that it's something that should be briefed to the president.
Well, as our viewers are all well aware, former National Security Advisor John Bolton has been talking a lot about the inner workings of the Trump administration, and he spoke with our Major Garrett in an interview for The Takeout. Bolton said that the Trump administration's handling of this information shows President Trump's, quote, lack of interest in intelligence, in his words. So I want to play for our viewers that bite.
The demonstration of the confusion inside the White House only gives our adversaries the stronger impression that the president simply doesn't pay attention to what he's being told or to thinking systematically about how you respond to it.
So, Charles, what do you make of Bolton's comments, especially given his former role in the Trump administration?
Yeah, well, it's troubling that he feels that way. And you know, it really is up to the presidential daily briefing materials and all the way down to the briefer to make sure that the president is engaged and that they have his attention. And really, it's delivering the information in the most effective way to the consumer, again, which is the president at the end of the day. So, you know, you really want to make sure that he is taking all of this information in and giving it its due attention. But again, back to that point, it's very troubling if that's the feeling throughout the administration regarding the president's perception or his body language or his feelings about the PDB in general. They don't take much time, but they are an important part of the day. And they have to occur each and every day as things change in this dynamic landscape. And you want to know that the president of the United States takes these seriously. And as far as those delivering the information, you want to make sure that they're doing it in the most thorough and competent manner.
Well, so far we know that President Trump has dismissed it as a hoax, but it did come from U.S. intelligence agents into the president's briefing from the U.S. intelligence community. And I'm wondering, Charles, if these allegations did in fact turn out to be true, what kind of repercussions could Russia face?
Yeah, I think based on the allegations of harming American soldiers overseas, it's quite blatant. We know Russia, we know Iran have a large interest in Afghanistan, right? We had the Russian-Afghan war decades ago, so we know that there's an interest in the area, and we know that both of those countries would rather see American soldiers out of there as soon as possible. As we would too as a country, but they especially want us to have nothing to do with that region. So I think, based on the seriousness of the threat, and if this pans out to be true, one, it's going to be a knock on the intelligence agencies if we've deemed something not credible and then determined that it was credible and has occurred. And then we're going to have to decide what our response is. And you can see a response in a form of many things. You can see sanctions, you can see military action, or you can see a combination of the two. That's what I would expect to have happen. But I can tell you that this should be very concerning to the American public to have another country threaten American assets and troops in Afghanistan.
Yeah, not normal business politics. So still a lot of questions. Charles Marino, thank you.
Thank you.